The one thing that used to bring all Americans together, regardless of political ideology or affiliation, was sports. Today, sports have become one of the most woke aspects of our culture, and it's especially true on America's college campuses. It's a sad fact, but it's not surprising. Professors can't even play fair in the classroom, so why would the rules on the field be any different? Wokeism makes poor sportsmanship look like a win. I'd settle for some crying soccer players right about now rather than listening to the left cry foul one more time. But in this episode of On the Front Lines, we're hitting wokeism head on and running down the craziest woke athletic stories ruining our favorite pastimes at Boston College, the University of Texas, Louisiana State University, Oregon, and the University of Oklahoma. All this and more, I'm Isabel Brown, and this is On the Front Lines. On campus, the left tries to silence us.
There's a lot of liberal indoctrination.
Universities don't stand for objective truth.
Assaulting us, threatening us.
We are on the front lines. Today we are on the front lines with several members of our incredible team here at Turning Point USA who used to be Division I athletes on their college campuses. We are diving into everything woke when it comes to college sports and beyond. Let's start with each of you telling us a little bit more about who you are, what sport you played, and where you went to school. Kylie, let's start with you.
Yeah, I played softball, Division I softball for Fordham University. I graduated in 2019. I was a catcher, and I played softball my whole life, literally since I was 7. I started off playing soccer, and my mom always told me that. I came up to her and said, I am not running up and down this field anymore. And literally ever since then, I've played softball. It's been a huge dedication in my life, and I graduated in 2019, and now I'm here, but it definitely made a giant impact.
I'm Brock. I played soccer at Wofford, which is in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Kind of like Kylie, I graduated in 2019 and had grown up kind of playing all sports, basketball, baseball, soccer, and kind of once I got into high school, switched over to be more specialized to focus on basketball and soccer, but knew kind of from birth that soccer was what I was going to do, and that's what I wanted to do in college, and that kind of led me to the Division I path. Is just I knew that I wanted to go to school for soccer, so it didn't really matter where in the country I was going to go. Just soccer was the ultimate end-all be-all for that.
How about you, Lily?
Awesome. Well, I'm Lily Standley. I played, ran track and field, pole vault specifically. That was my only event in college. And I had done all sports throughout high school and was fast, played volleyball, but realized I'm not 6'2", so it was going to be really hard to do something with that. I knew athletics. If I was going to go to college, it was going to be an athlete. That's the only way. So I went to Grand Canyon and competed there for a couple years. I'm still there, but no longer on the track team, and it was great while it lasted. So
you have a great story about that in terms of all this woke ideology and just insanity permeating your athletic experience. Why did you decide to leave the track and field team at GCU?
Well, unfortunately, it was no longer serving me, which I've never quit a sport in my life, and I'm not a quitter. My family knows I'm not a quitter, but when my dad was like, okay, this has gotten to the point where you're just wasting time and energy being there. They were so rude and discriminatory against me being a conservative and speaking out against COVID protocol and BLM stuff that happened over the summer, that I was leaving the training room every day in tears, and I couldn't get treated because I wasn't an on-campus athlete. It was just a whole lot of things, and I finally had to say, I need to go spend my energy somewhere where I'm valued. So I took a bigger role here at Turning Point, and that's where I've been.
What were some of the specific things that your coaches and teammates were saying to you that were discriminatory against conservatives?
Well, track and field is a predominantly African-American sport, which is lovely. And I was very close with my whole team for the whole 2 years I had been there. We had roomed together. They'd come to my house. I threw a bunch of parties with them. We would hang out all the time. And then this past summer hit, and things really got really rocky, and the whole team completely ostracized me. My coach, or my captain was tweeting, if you're associated with Lily Standley, block me on everything. Both my captains had blocked me on all of social media, and they would not talk to me. They sent a kid to lunch as like a representative to see if they could exist on the same track as me for the year. And I went and met with him, and he told me that he thinks this is all crazy. And I would literally have to run up to people on the field and be like, please, let's just talk. Why are we doing all this social media stuff? There was group chats about all my stuff that I would post, and the straw that really broke the camel's back was the COVID protocols. Being at a private Christian university, I was just floored at the lack of communication and consistency between things, and they had changed the COVID testing method to something I wasn't comfortable with. These are not nurses administering tests, they're trainers who wrap ankles. I'm not saying I won't test, because we had to test, and I said I just want a different test, my body, my choice, and they dismissed me over that. 17 emails with the AD later, I finally was able to take my test. that I wanted. And then from there, my coach was telling me, nobody's coming after you. No one's targeting you while wearing black power shirts to practice. While kids on the track team he knew had stolen my stuff out of my locker, had slashed my tires. And it just became impossible. Kids were messaging me in private like, oh, thank you for saying something. Thank you for being the only one to question anything on the Zoom. And I'm like, I can't bear it on my own.
Yeah.
You guys need to start talking. The administration was telling me to keep it under wraps. And I'm like, no way. Like, this is crazy, you guys. So it was unfortunate. I had to give up my passion, my sport. And, I'm sure as we've all realized, there's a little bit of an identity crisis that happens when you're no longer able to be an athlete, and because there's so much fulfillment and time and energy there. But I don't know, the Lord always kind of puts you where you're supposed to be, and I'm much better here. So it's been interesting.
I think what was so shocking for me as a friend of yours and going to work with you every day, hearing this story, was that this was happening at a private Christian school here in Phoenix, Arizona, at Grand Canyon University, where we do expect a lot of this stuff to happen is in more leftist areas like Fordham University, Kylie, which is where you played sports. What was your experience like with the woke mob coming into power while you were there at Fordham, and especially in leadership positions for athletics on campus?
Yeah, so I went to school at Fordham. It's in New York City specifically, so really left. What's interesting is for the majority of my time at Fordham, it wasn't like that. My softball team, a majority of my teammates, we were all pretty conservative. My coach at the time was really conservative, and it was fun and it was great. President Donald Trump was coming into office. We all had a great time talking about that. But specifically my senior year is when it got kind of weird, not so much in where I felt like I needed to censor myself, because I just simply won't do that. I would never do that. And I actually minored in political science, so I didn't have to do that. But I was a part of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. It's called SAC. Every school has one. But what started to happen my senior year is that these committees would turn into like a woke committee. There'd be a diversity one and that sort of stuff. And it was, in my opinion, really divisive. I don't know. It's not, that was not something that I ever thought would happen. I mean, I don't look at people that way or anything like that. And the fact that we were almost forced to do that in a student athlete advisory committee where we were supposed to be like the leaders of our team and representing our team, it didn't sit well with me at all.
What were some of the things being pushed around from the loudest voices on this committee?
Yeah, it was the Race and Inclusion Committee, and to me, that was not something that I really wanted to be involved in. And for me, I felt that if you didn't volunteer to be a part of that committee, it was almost like you weren't in support of it. Because you'd go around and you'd say, who wants to be a part of this committee? Who wants to be the head of this committee? And a lot of people in the room would raise their hand because, everyone wants to be a big part of that. I didn't want to be, because I don't think that's equality. I don't think that's how you achieve it at all. And it felt very strange to be a few of the only people in the room not raising your hand to be a part of that. And you could tell that people would look at you a little differently.
Yeah. Brock, you didn't really experience a ton of indoctrination while you were playing college sports. Tell us more about that, and then what it looked like after college for you as you started working in the professional sports arena too.
So I was a little lucky in that when I graduated in 2019, that was like kind of right up to the point where all like kind of the insert of the wokeness kind of got into the athletics world. So like going into 2020 is kind of during all that started during COVID. So I kind of got out right before that, which was really good. The good thing about being in South Carolina too, I did go to a very liberal university, but I think a lot of the students there, being typically from the South, they were from all over the country, but the majority of the students being from the South kind of leaned more conservative, so they kind of had similar like-minded values as me, so we kind of all saw politically things like COVID kind of all similar.
Yeah.
I think if I had been around that next year, when all the COVID protocols, like Lily said, got to put into place and stuff like that, there definitely would have been some pushback. Some people would have been like, well, I don't agree with that. And now you see it all over with professional sports, and then now into college sports, all they preach is player safety from the top down. They're like, we protect our athletes, we don't want to go to this. When in fact, all the COVID protocols they put in with vaccine mandates, all these kind of things were the exact opposite of player safety.
Right.
There was, right at the beginning, there was no solid science on whether or not that they could test athletes multiple times a day, get them vaccinated to play in games. Yet they were still going out and playing football games where they had to wear a mask all during practice, all during the lead up to the games, but for 3 hours could sit there and play football with each other with no mask on. It was totally okay.
Right.
And so there was a complete double standard there, which for college athletes that don't have the protection of professional athletes with player associations, that's where it's most dangerous, because those kids like 1 or 2% of college athletes go play professional sports.
Yeah.
So the rest of the country doesn't have that same protection, and those are the kids that you feel for the most because they don't have a say because they can get kicked out of their school and lose
Right.
their education.
Yeah, one time when I realized it was really getting bad on my campus with the protocol was track and field is broken up into event groups. So every event group has their own coach. My coach decided that us pole vaulters were going to be the only event group to wear masks on the field while running and jumping. He said, we're going to do everything we can
That's so
to say
bizarre.
that the pole vault team wasn't the one spreading it. So I kid you not, we're running and pole vaulting with a mask on while the rest of the track is doing their thing. We go into the weight room, and then everyone has to wear one. And I will never forget, my weight coach and I were really close. We were really good buddies. They're cool dudes, hard men. So I'm like, these are my people. They'll get it, right? Psych. So I wore a mesh mask one day because it's Arizona. It's 115 degrees outside. We're running circles. I can't breathe. And I walk in and he's asking me about my mask and saying, we're going to have problems with that. But they vocalize in the weight room with everyone there that he's like, hey guys, I know like this is tough. Just keep it below your nose. Keep it over your chin, but below your nose. And so I'm like, okay, so then there should be no problem with me wearing a mesh mask. Of course there was, because nothing can be consistent. And he looked at me and I said, well, you can go around and tell all the kids to put it over their nose then, because this is no different. And he looked at me in the eyes and said, you just have to shut up and comply. And I said, you can lie to me and tell me that this is about safety, or you can tell me the truth that this is about control. And I got booted from the weight room that day.
Control really is a great word, I think, for that. And that's what we're
I
seeing,
mean,
not just
yeah,
with COVID, but
totally.
ideologically too, with BLM
Absolutely.
and the rise of sports needing to be as progressive as possible politically.
Right.
Brock, you worked in the NBA after college graduation in 2019-2020 era when things were really heating up in that arena. What did that look like for you?
It was weird. So I worked for the Chicago Bulls right after I graduated. So the second half of the NBA season would have been the beginning of the COVID year, from January to May in there. And so there was the period of time where nobody knew what to do, where it kind of was first going around, and you had the initial people that were like, oh yeah, that's not going to be a big deal though. Well, then it became a very big deal. Yeah. Nobody knew how to react. So everybody was coming into work, they had their sleeves over their hands and wouldn't touch, door frames, where people like me were like,
Right.
I have a 99.9% recovery rate, I'll be fine doing everything. So you had half the people showing up, half the people not showing up. Well, then they canceled the season. They were like, everybody go home. So, we're a multi-billion-dollar organization. We were told, hey, go work from home for the next 5 months. And then the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago put mandates in where you literally couldn't leave your apartment unless it was for like emergency services, or like you had to go do something. So I sat in my apartment working for an NBA team that wasn't playing basketball, just trying to figure out what to do, which was the craziest thing. But all throughout the season before that, you could kind of see the leanings in of like, the NBA is very politically woke, and you see now with the NFL being that too, is they try to insert little things that don't actually make a difference, but it visually makes it like,
virtue
they're like,
signals.
oh yeah, virtue
Like
signals.
painting the floor.
100%. So the thing that got me is we're sitting up, working a game one night, and they have Lori Lightfoot out to do a ceremonial tip-off, and it's like
I can't picture her playing basketball. I'm just gonna be totally
Jeez.
It was so funny because like when you really sit there and look at it, she's the number one person destroying the city of Chicago.
Totally.
And they're having her out there just to like hand the ball to the referees and do all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of like,
It's a joke.
If people would actually open their eyes and realize that they shouldn't just have her out here because, she literally had a COVID mascot come up on stage and dance, and the media sitting there going like, you realize 100 people were shot last night. And she's like, well, we have the COVID mascot. Wear your mask.
wow.
Mixed
And
up
so
priorities.
things like that were just too crazy to begin with. And then they ended up coming back in the summer, which was crazy. And so they got everybody into one bubble, which you could have argued was against player safety, but they took protocols necessary. So there was it was funny to see the different stages of how it grew.
Totally.
From being a normal season to the rise of COVID to in the middle of COVID, and then the summer with the riots and all that stuff just was wild.
Today, I think the craziest thing plaguing college athletes in particular has been this call to have biological men compete with biological
my
women in
gosh.
sports. We have men and women, the only two options, by the way, here on the couch. So I'd be curious to get each of your takes on what that's going to look like for the future of women's equality in sports. Kylie, let's start with you.
I think it's super damaging. I mean, that's the obvious answer, right? I mean, I worked my entire life since I was 7, 8 years old, hours on weekends, weekdays, in between school, whenever I could, to play softball and achieve this Division I level. And then to possibly get that taken or harmed for people who are going through that right now, because there's a biological difference between someone, but they're allowing them into the sport, it's disappointing. But not only that, it's dangerous. I played softball. It's much different than baseball.
Totally.
And men and women should not be on the same field with softball. Everything's closer, everything's faster, but not only that, men are strong. I can't imagine standing at third base and having a man just absolutely drill a ground ball at me. I can't imagine that. It's dangerous to the players. It's the amount of time I caught, but the amount of times where I've seen our pitchers get a shot right at them, like a line drive right at them, and have to duck, or sometimes they catch it, whatever. Can you imagine that being 10 times as hard because there's a male there hitting?
Yeah, it is.
It's so dangerous.
It's so dangerous, and it worries me for the youth that are coming into this system that the left is implementing into our sports.
Yeah, I've actually really looked into this whole situation because it's so incredibly mind-boggling to me that the same feminists that fought for women to be able to play in sports are now fighting for men to have our titles. And I looked at just my sport alone, pole vault, okay? There's a 4.5-foot discrepancy between Olympic women and Olympic men. Number 1 girl in the world, love her, she's a great lady. 16'2", maybe. Men are over 20 feet. Mondo Duplantis, great, stunning athletes. And then you look at the top, you take the top women's pole vault, and it doesn't even rank 600th. On the list of the overall number 1 vaults in the world. So you're telling me, I mean, it's a complete obliteration of women's sports, actually. We do not stand a chance. There's fundamental differences between men and women. It's beautiful. I love it. I love being able to go watch men's volleyball and women's volleyball. It's 2 totally different sports. And the fact that we're not protecting that, it is the end of women's sports. That's it. It's not damaging. It's not a problem. It is the end. There will be no more competition for women. Our spots are gone, our titles are gone, our scholarships are gone, our professional arena is gone if we continue to allow that trend to happen.
Well, that's what I think is so funny too, is like all we ever hear about from the U.S. women's soccer team, they are so loud all the time.
All the
it's
time.
like, you guys got to relax a little bit. Like the amount of money you get paid from a pool at like a World Cup is significantly higher percentage than the men get paid out. It's like, but their sport just generates that much more money. You guys should be focusing on this issue more and protecting women playing soccer rather than focusing on the monetary gain from it, because you're actually getting a higher percentage payout at like the specific World Cup they're talking about. So it's kind of like, focus on not being like, hey, we need to catch up to the men's side. It's like, protect your game.
Yeah.
Allow it to just, don't let men come into your game, because guess what's going to happen if you continue to let that? That game's going to go away and it'll just be full of men. So that game won't exist
It's
anymore.
incredible. And you know what's funny? The argument about transgenders in sports, it never hurts men. Show me an example of a sport where a woman went into the men's arena and won. You will not find it. You will only find women's skulls being crushed in MMA fighting, their titles being lost in track and field, them getting hurt. I mean, it's a real thing. Women, like a woman died overseas by fighting a guy. Now, she probably shouldn't have done that, but she got pounded in the head and she died. I mean, you will not, it only hurts women. It only hurts women.
I remember seeing, ESPN had a big thing about it a few years ago. One of the tennis analysts on there was talking about Serena Williams, and he kind of did a comparison that was like, hey, Serena Williams would generally lose to like a Division I college men's player.
Totally.
Like, not taking anything away from her. She's probably the greatest female athlete who's ever lived.
Right.
But she would get beat by a Division I men's tennis player. And they just freaked out. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, like, genuinely, look at statistics here. This is like their serve speed. This is all this kind of stuff.
Trust the numbers and the science,
and
right?
I think even Serena Williams came out, is smart enough to be like, hey, like, I can agree with that. Like, let's be real. Yeah, I'm a great woman, but like, I would get beat by this guy. Not taken away from her. She's amazing. But like, she would get beat by a pretty average man.
We just have to stop catering society and rules to such a small population of people. Like, these people need love and compassion and support and help. We don't need to redesign our whole system around them, because it only hurts women. I don't care if you want to have a transgender volleyball team, wonderful, but like, protect sports, protect women.
And true equality at the end of the day.
True equality. I mean, you can't just like blur all the lines and expect things to work out better. It doesn't work like that. It only hurts women. Men are that's how, you want to talk about advancing the patriarchy?
Pivoting gears a little bit, big change to what's happening in college sports in the last year or so has been able to be using your name, image, and likeness for endorsements
100%.
and sponsorships. How do you guys think this woke culture is going to be impacted in college athletics now that you see these companies like Nike and other companies that are really pushing the woke political agenda now being able to use that for college students before they even become professional athletes?
Yeah, I think it's just going to push it further, because now these young kids, I don't want to say kids, but these young adults, they don't know what, I mean, I was lucky enough where in college I knew what I believed politically. I was very strong in my values. I could be indoctrinated all I want and I wouldn't believe it. I knew that. But there's people, and I've learned this through the people that I've gone to school with, who they don't know better.
And any amount of money.
They don't know better, and they will just be a mouthpiece for that woke company that's giving them money. And I think that's really dangerous, not only for the conservative movement. Hopefully there's conservative companies that are trying to go after these athletes like Turning Point's doing, which is incredible, and I'm sure Lily will have a lot to say about that. But these woke companies are going after our athletes and then using them as a mouthpiece to the younger kids that are looking up to them. And I think that's super dangerous. It's getting their agenda across on a whole nother level.
Totally.
I think that's so powerful, using an athlete as a mouthpiece for that, and that's what we've seen in professional sports, but imagine how much that's going to continue impacting the college
It'll be
community,
really
too.
curious to see going forward, once the COVID, if the COVID kind of trend ever dies down, what the next thing is, what the next agenda push will be to grasp kind of these kids, because once the COVID thing's going, you can't focus on wearing your mask, being vaccinated, all those sorts of things. What is it next? Because it'll be something.
I think it'll be this gender thing. I mean, I think it really
Gender or
went
climate.
from BLM and trying to use race as a means to inject that into sports. Now, obviously, COVID's the new thing. You can't turn on ESPN without them screaming about the latest athlete that's not vaccinated. But now I probably think it's this biological women's sports movement.
Seriously.
What about you, Lily? What do you think?
Yeah, well, fortunately, I've been given the opportunity here at Turning Point to create an athlete sponsorship program where we're looking for conservative college athletes and giving them a platform a little bit, because all they want to do is make you feel like you're the only one. You're the only conservative. You're the only kid questioning protocols, the only one pushing back on anything. And it's simply not true. My inbox was flooded with stories that were very validating. It made me feel good to know that, okay, I didn't throw my whole thing away for nothing, okay? There's kids that need help. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the music industry, where they prey on kids, essentially. Some of these people are kids.
Well,
and
when you're
young
recruited,
adults.
you are,
And you're able to just push your agenda and feed them money and, lights, camera, action, verified on Instagram and all this stuff. And it never fulfills them, and it just exploits them. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And also, I've noticed, of course, conservative organizations need to step into that and start playing the game back. Problem is, we're running into countless universities saying, actually, political companies are not going to be something you can partner with.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it was never in the original NCAA guidelines. I've read it front to back. I read every single school's NIL contracts, and it's not in there. But it'll just say, and anything else that we decide that you can't. So it's they completely leave it gray, so that they can't completely out themselves as being against any sort of conservative or political organization, but they will, and they do. And it's,
and of course they'll work with corporate companies buying into the left's woke agenda. It's not overtly a political company.
It's so sad, because these athletes are finally excited. They're like, we can be the capitalists we've always wanted to be, but they're not realizing they're going to just be exploited and used. It's just it's a business. Everything is a business.
like they're selling
the
their soul.
NCAA has been on the out. Nobody cares. This has been an issue for them for a long time. People have been begging them, like, allow athletes to do this. And they were in the dumps, low ratings, no one watching college sports. So they said, screw it, let's give them the ability to profit off themselves. They have no idea what they're doing. It'll be very interesting to see how it develops in the next couple years and what restrictions are put on it as soon as you're finding kids that are getting paid way too much money. So it's very interesting to see this trend. It's just another way for people to make money. And I hope that conservatives can kind of step up their game a little bit.
Interesting to think about, because you have your set of college athletes, right? Like your Alabama football players, your Duke basketball players, your Kentucky basketball players. They're going to get money from the Nikes, all that kind of stuff.
Totally.
Because they're going professional. Those guys are like the one of ones, the special amongst the special, if that makes sense. Then you have your other set of college athletes who are making money, like the girl that plays gymnastics at LSU, the Libya girl that's TikTok famous, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of influencer athletes, they're going to get brand deals based on their
It creates a monopoly.
less of what she does athletically,
Right.
even though she's probably a great gymnast. She's getting paid because of her brand on TikTok, which is, hey, great for her. She's going to make over $1 million.
Right.
Awesome. What about the other 97% of college athletes that aren't influencers and aren't the one of ones? They're just Division I college athletes, which there's a
100%.
ton. How can they're not going to get offers from Nike, Adidas, all these kind of special brands, so they're going to have to work with companies like this, and if they're not allowed to, that
Right.
hinders them in a way.
Right.
So,
It actually is very interesting, because although it's a great capitalist opportunity, unfortunately, we know if you're given too much power and ability, things will sour. So it creates a monopoly on these athletes. The big guys who already have a big platform, the big football players, the big names, yes, they can profit off their jersey sales as they always should have been, but unfortunately it's going to create more of like a self-identity, and it's going to be less about the team and the sport, and it's going to be about you and your brand sponsorships, and you walk out on the field and everybody's cheering for you because your jersey and your brands and they've got your gear, and it's going to sour. It's almost, I mean, I've seen it. I've talked to people about it where it's turning teammates against teammates.
Oh,
because now they're
absolutely.
sour that why did he get the
Yep.
deal and I didn't get the deal? And it comes down to looks, and it comes down to all of these things that have nothing to do with athletics.
As if that's not already a problem with competing for a spot.
Exactly.
Especially on a small team. I mean, obviously I can't speak on football, but on a small team like softball, we had maybe 20 players on my team. Like, it's very small. And we went to a small university, so even more so. And then it's like, well, she's getting that spot because of this.
Because
and I can't
they'll bring in that
imagine-
sponsorship.
Yeah, and now I can't
it's not about
imagine.
sports.
It's like a whole level up from that now.
Yep.
And I obviously dealt with it in college in a way of like just fighting for a spot to play on the field, but now there's that. And
Right.
that's
Competing in
really
that
If people
regard,
were
too.
honest and true and had good morals, something like this could work really well. Unfortunately, we know that's not the case, and it's going to probably bring a lot more problems than good. So
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see how this trend goes.
big thing-
Sports has gone, there's nothing about athleticism anymore.
Yeah.
It's not about sports.
The big thing to remember with that too is this is going to be hard for people to grasp, especially college athletes. The only two college sports that generate money for their university is men's football and men's basketball.
Totally.
Okay. Every other sport loses money.
Yep.
Every other men's sport loses money, along with every other women's sport. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. And then from that line, you can look up and say, okay, if women's gymnastics doesn't make money for a university, what's going to generate money for, if I'm a girl and I'm going to be a college athlete, I'm immediately starting a TikTok in high school and Instagram, and I'm trying to get influencer famous because that'll bring me a sponsorship, which will more likely get me to a Division I university if I'm
It's
already
cool.
famous.
That's a
which
very
is
good
wild
point.
to think about. I agree with the NIL laws. People should be getting paid for their name, image, and likeness, but only certain high-level athletes are going to get sponsorships based off their athletic abilities, where others are going to get famous for
like a popularity
the brand deal.
contest.
they have, which,
It
like,
is a complete
to each their
popularity
own.
contest.
I totally agree with that. They should get paid for their brand likenesses, but if you're going to let them be able to do that, you have to protect the students who aren't Instagram famous, who
Yep.
don't have a following.
Great
that
point.
Companies want to work with them that might have conservative values.
And
You have
that's
to
so
allow that.
interesting because when I was being recruited in college, it was like better if you didn't have social media.
Yeah.
Like honestly, you better not put anything bad on social
Totally.
media.
Yep.
Don't even have a
Oh my
red
gosh.
Solo cup anywhere in the vicinity of anything, right? And we were told that once you get redlined from someone's list, like a college's list, you're done. You're not going there.
was-
and now
Yep.
it seems like it's getting encouraged.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because for me, it was literally opposite.
Yep.
And I'm not that old.
Avoid
I'm 24
that.
years old. I graduated college
Such a
in
good point.
2019, and it was completely opposite of that.
That
We
is
are
such a good
running out of time, but I want to ask you all one last question. Are you hopeful for the future of collegiate athletics, or do you think it might be too far gone?
Well, I mean, the athlete in me wants to be hopeful. Unfortunately, unless we have a rude awakening and bring people back to the beauty of sports and competition and athleticism, I'm concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to be hopeful as well because I think athletics, specifically college athletics, brings such an edge to your adult life when you
Yes.
graduate. It's hard at first because you do have a little bit of an identity crisis that Lily talked about earlier, but you are a leader, you're a better communicator, you're not soft-spoken for the most part, and it brings such great attributes to your adult and
Yes.
professional world that I really hope that college athletics steps up and continues to be that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm super hopeful for college athletics. I think sports today are the only reason why people watch TV, right? Live TV. That's the only reason they watch it. So TV deals are only going to get bigger for sports specifically. But I think college athletics are going to change big time going forward. I believe the NCAA is going to just allow high school kids to go straight to the NBA very soon. I wonder what they're going to do with football going forward. I think college athletics will look extremely different now, and especially new NIL deals. Like if I was a kid, I might stay in college longer
Yeah.
Right.
and benefit off the money before I go to the NFL or something
Right.
like that. So, I mean, to be honest with you, if I was in high school right now or in middle school and I had a really good chance of being an athlete, I would want to get super famous on my own, almost to the point where I'm focusing more on that than being a college athlete, because you can benefit the best of both
Which is kind of a bummer, because you don't want to limit your athleticism.
Exactly,
that way,
which could be a dual-edged sword, but to be honest, good for them. I mean, if I was in college right now, I'd be trying to get the bag too. Like,
so true. Kylie, Brock, Lily, thank you so much for joining us on the front lines. You're all doing incredible work here at TPUSA as well. And I'm just so excited to see where your career post-athletics takes you. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back with more Woke Athletics on the front lines. Sports. Love them, hate them, don't care about them. Wherever you're at, they are a huge part of American culture, especially when it comes to the American college experience. But like literally everything else in our society, sports have become a tribute to the woke and progressive left. And trust me, what's happening in sports is anything but progressive. Whether it's bowing down to the almighty BLM Inc., kneeling for the national anthem, or weaponizing biological differences for the sake of first place, long gone are the days where sports were not just fair, but fun. Remember when sports let the best athletes win? I do, but many of today's American colleges do not. It's time for your State of Campus. Let's kick things off today on the East Coast at Boston College. Yes, the traditionally conservative Catholic school, Boston College, where last fall the football team chose not to take the field to practice in order to raise awareness and catalyze a discussion about race relations in America. Because nothing says progress and equality like encouraging minorities in our country to just not show up in the name of courage. Failure is success, apparently. Cancellation of football practice happened just after the shooting of Jacob Blake, a Kenosha man who was shot last summer after resisting arrest, as national outcry became louder thanks to BLM Inc. If student athletes protested sports practice every time a criminal acted, well, criminally, college football would go extinct. Sports scholarships would be irrelevant, and ironically, there would likely be more Jacob Blake scenarios. Sports have the power to change the lives of students for the better. They give us a purpose, a healthy outlet, a community, goals, and even scholarships to go to school. Woke activism contradicts all of that. Want to actually help minorities and young people? Encourage them to play sports. Basketball courts, not state courts. Extracurriculars, not incarceration. Am I right? The left would say wrong, because if minority student athletes actually excelled to their fullest potential, they would be out from under the thumb of the left, and the sham of woke ideology would finally lose. The University of Texas is equally as woke. Student athletes recently made several demands of the school's administration in order to be more racially inclusive. Pro tip, there will never be an end goal for these leftists calling for racial inclusivity. The chaos of the left only breeds more chaos. The bar will constantly be moving for the rest of our lives when it comes to fundamentally changing our society to accommodate the demands of leftist college students. But I digress. Student athletes demanded the University of Texas remove the school song, The Eyes of Texas, which apparently includes racial undertones. Does it though? Listen for yourself. The students also demanded the university donate money to Black Lives Matter Inc., rename several buildings on campus, remove statues, and include a stipulation that any new sculptures or statues that are to be put in place in the future must be made by people of color in order to promote a more diverse campus, according to Campus Reform. In a backwards world, this sounds totally progressive and anti-racist to me. Speaking of backwards worlds, we're headed to our Professor Watch List next. Don't go anywhere. Woke sports on campus are hard enough to follow, but nothing compares to the mental gymnastics of the left, especially from today's college professors. Today on Professor Watchlist, let's meet Professor Anthony Zenkis, a lecturer from the School of Social Work at Columbia University. Professor Zenkis lives in a completely backwards, upside-down fantasy world where what he thinks is correct and actual reality is simply oppressive. He's previously stated that slavery, genocide, and World Wars I and II are the result of capitalism, and that Adolf Hitler himself was a capitalist. Never mind the facts that slavery existed thousands of years before the dawn of capitalism, and Hitler led the Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party. Clearly, Professor Zenkis has no idea what capitalism even means. Capitalism allows the best ideas to win out, and Hitler had one of, if not the, absolute worst and most evil ideas in the 20th century. When the worst idea wins out, we call that socialism, not capitalism. Someone get this guy a history book so that he, in the words of his own ideology, can check his professor privilege. Professor Anthony Zenkis, you're on our list. And all you other educators out there, keep it up, and you just might make our Professor Watch List. We're back on campus at Louisiana State University, who apparently thought making a public statement supporting the Marxist BLM Inc. organization just wasn't enough. Instead, they actually held a march through campus with the LSU football team last season in support of racial justice. The players who organized the march said they were inspired by professional athletes in the NBA who postponed games and held strikes in support of social justice. They paraded around campus, around the perimeter of Tiger Stadium, then up Victory Hill instead of going to football practice. What I don't understand about the entire social justice movement is, well, frankly, a lot. But I really don't get why the left is so obsessed with mediocrity instead of success in making a statement. Rather than encouraging their fellow players to practice as much as possible, become incredible football players, and set new records in American athletics, staging a strike to avoid success seemed like a better option? How is that progress? Also, what exactly did walking around in a circle do to help social justice or advance the agenda of BLM Inc.? Did you all get your 10,000 steps for socialism in on your Apple Watches? Did you post about this extra special leg day workout on Instagram to virtue signal to your classmates? The left doesn't want MVPs. MVP status requires discipline, values, merit, and strong men and women. The left wants bench warmers who cry on command and aim to be the culture's most valuable victims in America. Over on the West Coast, one of the wokest states in America is setting a new standard for policing language in sports. The annual rivalry football game between the University of Oregon and Oregon State has been officially renamed after previously being called a civil war. I think that's a clever name, since two sides are fighting against each other even though they're in the same place. Kind of like how the actual Civil War worked. But of course, the left lost their minds over something that has probably never been considered offensive by anyone, except maybe former player Dennis Dixon. He held discussions with the administrations of both schools to urge a name change for the annual game, which worked after the schools agreed to drop the use of the term Civil War for all meetups in the future. The director of athletics at the University of Oregon said, "We must all recognize the power of words and the symbolism associated with the Civil War." Yeah, I recognize the importance of remembering the Civil War. It's not like the football rivalry is bringing back an actual war. It's literally just a clever name for a competition. Relax, people. Sheesh, and those powers from words can be so dangerous, especially when they represent actual history. Not to mention a historical event that helped to create a more equal future for all. But it's too offensive to appreciate American history now, especially because it was built on racism. I learned that in Critical Race Theory 101. Many of these stories we share with you every week are so shocking because they're taking place on campuses we would never expect this type of leftism from. It's not always the Berkeleys and Harvards of the world pushing woke ideology. Sometimes it takes you by surprise. Our final story for you today is no exception. We're headed, of all places, to the University of Oklahoma. This year, a courageous student athlete named Kylie Michael, a volleyball player at the university, sued her school after she was allegedly kicked off the team because her coaches and teammates were intolerant toward her conservative views. At the University of Oklahoma. Going out on a limb here saying that these coaches were probably super open-minded people who encouraged accepting everyone's differences. Psych. Her coaches argued during the lawsuit that Kylie's conservative social media posts were detrimental to the team atmosphere. They went in to argue for a dismissal of the lawsuit eventually, saying a player's speech that potentially disrupts, distracts from, or hurts team unity, sportsmanship, or the cohesiveness of the team is subject to a coach's remedial action. In other words, if you're a conservative, we're going to kick you off the team because our feelings are hurt by your opinions. This sets a really low bar for what disrupts team unity now. Are we expecting that every teammate on every sports team has to be in agreement on everything? Can two teammates disagree about pineapple on their pizza? What about Coke and Pepsi? Not if it dares to disrupt team unity. Of course, it didn't matter to Kylie's coaches that her teammates repeatedly called her a racist and a homophobe. She must have been the problem because of her opinions. You have to be doing something really bad to be called those harsh names, like, I don't know, supporting American history or not treating people based on what they look like. The University of Oklahoma's administration even ended up contacting Kylie to inform her she would need to engage in mandatory re-education training on classism, ableism, trans and homosexual negatives, and sexism. Wait, I missed the part where she went to school in China. Do the Sooners have a satellite campus in the Wuhan province? Because I'd sooner rather go to literally any other university than this one. Thankfully, Kylie escaped the madness and has since transferred to play volleyball at the University of Mississippi, a college in America. We're so proud of her courage and wish her all the best in her future athletic endeavors. Students across the country like Kylie are breaking free from the left's chokehold on sports culture, and something tells me sports aren't too far gone yet. By the way, if you're looking for more sports content free from the woke world, check out our TPUSA live show called Breakaway. Are you a student athlete on campus with a crazy story? We want to hear it, so pitch it into the comments. And that's your State of Campus. There are so many students in America who find the courage to stand up against the progressive left. For all of our student athletes out there, always remember these woke rules. Not playing your sport raises awareness. Boys do throw and hit like girls. Don't ever correlate a historic event to something today, and never refute your leftist teachers and coaches with conservative logic, because it's probably just your privilege talking. Just kidding. Shoot your shot, break the ice, and spike over the leftist net that your professor is putting on your college education. And don't let wokeism touch down on your rights. Okay, I'm done now. This is your voice, your stories, your fight. Together, we are on the front lines.